seems to be very, very supported by, rigorous empirical research. Include that. If you get what I got, which I think is great, some people that say yes and some people that say no, we have a debate now. Now we have a true bona fide debate. Some people say the correlation that I suggested is very, very strong. Some people say that the correlation isn't very strong, which is further supported by the fact that this research was published in 2012. They're in the middle right now of attempting to establish this correlation, right? So, not only is this contribution good for logic, this contribution is good for environmental science, I would imagine, right? Which is bizarre. All right, page 17. And then insert citation, right? So the citation establishes a more complex relationship, right? So that's that. Actually, we might be able to go through this rather quick because there isn't really much I have to write. I thought it's a lot of text, and I hope I'm not going through this too quick, but there's really nothing for me to write because I've established so much up until this point. All right, number 3. So irrespective of their, and now this is me fleshing out. This is going to end up being sort of part of the paragraph, right? Part of the argument that is being constructed. So irrespective, and obviously this is my own writing style, so you would write something different, right? But irrespective of their interpretive differences, strong correlation, weak correlation, both of the preceding citations address the connection between population growth and water pollution, which is good. Why is it good? Because I needed to make an appeal to authority to establish the conditional claim. We need such a disclaimer to remind readers we're here not concerned necessarily with how the facts are resolved. That's not our job, that's their job. But that our connection, our conditional claim, is valid and is currently under empirical scientific investigation. Correlation is never a demonstration of proof, ever. Right? That's just a fact. Right. The idea that correlation is never a demonstration of proof is itself a fact. And it's true. So, only likelihood, which is why I carefully selected the word, right? It's a likelihood that there's a connection, right? This connection is likely, and empirical scientists are assessing the true strength of that connection as we speak, really. So therefore, if groundwater pumping is increased, then current research suggests that, which is the new insertion, right? So current research suggests that the likelihood for water pollution may also increase, right? And the idea of likelihood is there to preserve the appeal to authority that said that this connection is complex and isn't as direct, right? So in fairness to that research, people of their own time went out and processed probably tons and tons of data, compiled a journal publication, submitted it for publication, and got published. It's a huge process to get your work out there. So we definitely want to lend respect. We want to respect other people's research by saying, well, it's likely. Okay. So then we have the final, actually the reason why this takes up so many pages is that I have to just restate everything, right? So now it's refined without all of my disclaimers and such, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, right? So the final statement, you can read it for yourself, bottom of page 17, flip over to page 18. The final claim, again, nevertheless, irrespective, middle of page 18, nevertheless, irrespective of their interpretive differences, both of the preceding citations, I need to put an S on that, address the connection between population growth and water pollution. Thus, if groundwater pumping is increased, then current research suggests that the likelihood for water pollution may also increase, period. Okay, so that concludes, really, the hypothetical syllogism, right? We have the hypothetical syllogism formalized, and then what we have after it is what I just said, right? It's the recognition that researchers are currently in the state of processing this information. So, what I need to do now, example number 3, is not to reaffirm everything, but just tack on the implication, and I'll just write it in the middle, right? I tack on the implication after the hypothetical syllogism. We've done this before. We formalize modus ponens. After modus ponens, we tacked on at the very bottom an implication, a conditional implication. We formalized modus tollens. At the end of modus tollens, we tacked on an implication. We formalized hypothetical syllogism. At the end, we're going to tack on another implication. The difference between this implication and the preceding 1-2 implications is that the preceding 2 implications in section 1 and section 2, respectively, were conditional implications. If this happens, then this happens. I'm going to ask you this, and I hope you can answer it. The question is, why was the first implication in section 1? Why was the first implication after the conclusion of modus ponens? Why was the first implication after the conclusion of modus ponens a conditional? The response is because we knew that after modus ponens we were going to be using modus tollens, and that the conditional is part of modus tollens, if A then B. Question 2. Why did we tack on the implication, a conditional implication, at the end of formalizing modus tollens? Answer: because we knew after modus tollens we're going to be using hypothetical syllogism, and the first line in hypothetical syllogism is a conditional claim. We can't use a conditional claim here. This is going to be a new type of implication, right? We need to formalize hypothetical syllogism, appropriate an implication from hypothetical syllogism, but this cannot be a conditional claim because the next thing that we're going to use in section 4, finally, is a disjunctive syllogism. So I want to just give you, a sense of where this is going. So let me read example number 3. We will simply tack the following implication from the logic onto the final sentence. Since we have satisfied hypothetical syllogism, the implication of hypothetical syllogism becomes again the link, the implication does, right? Becomes the link for the next logical rule of inference, which is disjunctive syllogism, right? And here's what we have. Thus, if groundwater pumping is increased, then current research suggests that the likelihood for water pollution may also increase. Since increased groundwater pumping supports increased population growth. That's the new bit. This relationship, however, leads to quite the dilemma. In attempts to decrease the consumption and pollution of our water supplies, either, and I need to highlight that, either, I need to highlight it and underline it. Why is that important? Go back to page 1, right? In disjunctive syllogism, I'm going to explain disjunctive syllogism in more detail later. In disjunctive syllogism, bottom of page 1, you see it says A, V, B. The V stands for, it's the disjunct, right? It stands for or, right? So we have disjunctive syllogism, DS, takes the form A or B, right? This position is either. Either or. Either this happens or this happens. Either this happens or this happens. Either this happens or this happens. Not if this happens, then this happens, right? So when we have the conditional claim, it says if, then. When we have the disjunctive, it says either or. We recognize that the implication after our hypothetical syllogism, since we're going to use a disjunctive syllogism next, cannot assume the form if, then. It has to assume the form either or. What we want to posit after we formalize our hypothetical syllogism is an implication which incorporates the phrasing either or, which will allow us to then extrapolate and extract this implication and assume the form of the disjunctive syllogism, right? Either or. So that either, I didn't underline it and bold it, but I will. I'll go back in the notes and make sure I make that amendment. But this attempts to decrease the consumption and pollution of our water supplies. Either we attempt to regulate population growth, right? And if you think about that, makes sense, right? If population growth increases, then water quality decreases, well, let's say the dry